Hi, everybody. My name is Dan Lapel for New Focus Recordings. Really excited to be joined here by Wang Lu. Uh, we're a little late to do a little chat about your recording, Lu, but I'm glad we got this chance to do it anyway. An Atlas of Time, which came out in the fall. And how are you doing?
Good, thank you, Dan. So glad we have this chance to talk. And
Yeah.
thank you for the virtual background of the album.
Yes. Yeah. So it's a wonderful album. Sort of an amalgamation of larger ensemble pieces and solos, duos, and small chamber music. And uh, before we forget, because sometimes I do forget to do this, thought it'd be nice to just shout out the various people that are involved in the album. So, ensemble wise, Boston Modern Orchestra Project, conducted by Gil Rose, otherwise known as BMOP, plays on the two larger ensemble pieces. Miranda Cookson plays a solo violin piece. Momenta Quartet plays double trance, and Ryan Muncie saxophone and myself on guitar play a duo. And in terms of the production credits, we've got Ryan Strieber mastering the album, and Jim Moses at Brown University was involved in a lot of the editing and also recording and mixing. Uh, and Joel Gordon also, right? What was he actually recorded the BMOP stuff?
Yes.
And cover and design. The cover design was Polly Apfelbaum and Dan Cole, and Mark Wolf did the design and layout. Am I missing anybody? Anthony
No.
Chung was also involved in some session production,
Right.
and yeah, but it was a great album, and I enjoyed also working on it with you, and I think everybody felt great about how it all came together. So congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for your extraordinarily, scarily acute ears in some of the editing sessions. Yeah.
No, that's just it's obsessive compulsive disorder. That's the other name for that. Um, so well, we're going to talk about three pieces from the record. One from one of the larger ensemble pieces, and then two from smaller forces. And maybe should we start with the title piece, the
uh,
House of Time, which is a six movement piece for BMOP?
sure. Thank you.
Do you want to give some context on that title? Uh, oh, Lara Pellegrini also wrote amazing liner notes. Let's not forget to mention her. And I thought she had some really cool insights into that idea of an atlas of time and the way that you use sort of found sounds and memory in your music. And I actually was curious if that the things she talked about in the liner notes were conscious things for you, or is it something that just happens naturally in your music and Lara was able to sort of identify it?
Um, I think was how it happened is very unintentional, and Lara is very perceptive and really musical and
Yeah.
to perceive and to write such nice notes. I think it's more like the title is an atlas of time as we all travel and live through different places and time as we grow older. It's interesting as you see this album and the previous one, they are both structured as a collection of pieces across at least 10 years of span. I like to see that, like viewing one's own photo albums or personal diary or letters, if you still write letters to people. So it's like autobiographical, it's private, but it is also not completely private because you want to share the music. So I like this idea of being able to pull oneself out of the situation you experienced and to reflect on it. So it's not, the exact experience anymore. Because, for instance, if when you're in love, you don't think, oh, this is the love of my life, or this is, but you're just in the situation. But only maybe years later, you recall, oh, that was like that. You cannot replicate the emotion. You cannot replicate the the blood pressure or the anything, but you could to me, I could think about different experiences at different time and places and relate to my music. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, and it speaks a little bit to the way it feels as a listener when you have these pre-recorded fragments that come into the texture or something like that. Uh, they come with such strong associations, whether or not they're actually the associations you intend. But in a way, I feel like you sort of put them out there in the music, and then you allow them to sort of freely go where they want to color the texture in a certain way, color the associations in a certain way. And that happens a lot in an Atlas of Time throughout the different movements. Maybe we can listen to one of them. How about the third movement, where so it's called Piccolo Trumpets, and we hear a pre-recording of it's sort of like a theme song from a children's TV show, right?
Radio broadcasting. There was no
Okay,
TV yet.
right, sorry, radio broadcast from China.
Right.
And I mean, unless you're familiar with this radio broadcast or you speak Chinese, you might not really know exactly what it is you're hearing, but you can certainly pick up on the quality of it, and that it's sort of for children, and that it has this sort of evocative sort of context. Well, let's take a listen. We can talk about it a little bit afterwards. So this is Bebop Orchestra, Gil Rose conducting, and the third movement of An Atlas of Time, piccolo trumpets.
So we just heard the third movement at the opening. You hear the children's radio broadcasting, daily radio broadcasting in China when I was growing up. The opening credit, dun 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 dun. I love the, of course, it's nostalgic to me, and but also what I love is the simplicity of this kind of music, not only in this opening credit, but in many of the school songs and in the group physical exercise. You know, you have those simple songs, and in those patriotic gatherings. It's the kind of character of the music that I grew up with in the 80s and 90s China. You have this socialist communal pride and experience that's embedded in the education, that only after you experience that, now as a grown up, you reflect, you see, when you hear that, you think about all of those experiences. And I distorted this opening credit in terms of pitch material, orchestrated, with for the ensemble, with dissonant intervals and irregular rhythm, not because that's what we do in contemporary music, but more like that's the uncertainty in the air during that time when China opened the door economically, and people for the first time experienced Western popular music, for instance, Western film, and Western lifestyle. And also on the uncertainty is where the country is going, and the great unknown potential for my generation to what we can do, what is going to be like to be a so-called woman, a professional, what can you become?
Hmm.
And also the constructions going on, building the entire country, the infrastructure. And many children of my generation playing the piano, so you can hear very bad churny like a piano playing
Yeah,
based on this motive. So it's all of that sociological background being quote unquote, I could say, translated into this movement. Yeah.
great, cool. There's some of that type of translation that happens a bit in the last piece on the album, Siren Song, too, right? Is there's some sort of contoured linguistic type gestures?
Right. Yeah, the last piece Siren Songs wrote before this one, 3 or 4 years before, when I was a graduate student, I was written for ICE. Um, so it's transliteration of local, my hometown dialect, Qinglai Shanxi dialect. Um, I love this intonation of it, not because everyone in my family speaks the language, but also I love how direct it is. The language also affects the custom and people's manner, which is very different, right? Like in this country, each state from the north, the south, and the east and the west, the coastal and the inland can be very different. Um, so I find it really interesting, and it's a very muscular language.
Hmm.
And the story is about very feudal, backward, dark, appalling story of a eunuch buys a young woman, and just in order to bury her when he dies. But the story is told in such a funny way, which is really troubling. So I'm trying to capture why people would enjoy this, find it of course they enjoy the aesthetic of the opera, as pure music, but not bothered by the story for generations, you
Yeah,
know.
right. Just sort of accepted as part of the culture. Yeah.
Yes.
And this technique of mirroring the contour of I guess in this case it's sort of a tonal language, right? Which actually might
Right.
the tones will affect the meaning. That's something that I feel like I heard in your work on your previous album too, Urban Inventory, especially specifically in the title track, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was one movement in Urban Inventory. I recorded a relative of mine who has a very strong accent from our hometown, and I find it really fascinating the kind of timbre she produces and the message. So I transliterated her speech into the music. It's not only the sound of it, the shape of it, but also the meaning of it. But of course, you don't translate Chinese, into English. It's not a real opera. But the message itself reflects a particular time of my and my parents' generation, when a lot of peasants are moving from the villages to the cities, and the cities are becoming enormous,
Yeah.
and people who are moving and changing their social security status in China from being a peasant to be an urban person is really transforming the country.
Sure.
And their perspective of what it means to be someone who lives in the city, which includes not to have a peasant accent,
Ah, yeah.
but
Interesting.
it's not something you can easily hide. So I find it really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's
once you open your mouth, it's like when I start to talk, it shows if I belong to this country or not.
right.
They could guess, well, she might be here maybe for a few years or maybe longer than a few years, but that shows, the accent shows your social status.
Yeah.
Um,
Interesting.
yeah. So
And
I like that aspect. Yeah. So when you hear it, you know where this person is from. You assume based on who you are.
yeah.
Um,
Right. 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 Well, speaking of the sort of transition to uh, sort of urban population density in China over the last several generations, or the sort of exponential growth. Another piece on this record really sort of addresses one of the uh, outcomes of that or the symptoms of that with pollution, right? And it's the piece
right.
Unbreathable Colors for solo violin that you wrote for Miranda
Mm.
Cookson. You want to talk about that piece a little bit, and then maybe we'll listen to the first minute of it.
Yeah, sure. So that piece, I was going to write a piece for, the incredible Miranda Coxon, and we didn't, like any other commission, we don't talk about like what it's about. No, I just decided to write the piece maybe over a winter break. Then it happened to be the winter. I went back to China. I usually don't go back during the winter break. And the pollution was just hazardous and was actually called hazardous and beyond index in the air pollution indication. But the saddest thing is not just the air pollution, is that how people react, like people in my family reacted to my ultra alarming reaction. Was like, no, this is very, very dangerous. I need to put on my N95. I need to hold on my digital indicator everywhere I go. And then I think I'm totally nuts.
Yeah.
But the fact that they're so used to it, they felt like, oh, actually today is not as bad as last week, before you
Oh,
came back. And I was like, wow, that's really alarming. And
yeah.
the color, the title unbreathable color is when the air is very clean, you have a green, right, indicating it's nice, it's clean. And then gradually becomes yellow and orange and red and purple and dark black, brown and black, and then beyond index.
Yeah.
So we're really reading the colors.
Hmm.
Um, and as I was thinking about the quality of the sound she can produce can be so wide ranged, but I decided to focus on that. You couldn't breathe and you couldn't project this brilliant sound, this
Mhm.
lyrical instrument and resonating harmony, what it would be like if the violin couldn't breathe. So a lot of those sounds are very dry and muted, muffled.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the direction I went. Yeah.
Great. Well, let's listen to the opening of Unbreathable Colors. Beautiful. That was the solo violin piece, Unbreathable Colors, performed by Miranda Cookson. And we'll talk about one more piece, uh, which is aptly named Ryan and Dan. And it was written for my colleague in the International Contemporary Ensemble, saxophonist Ryan Muncie, and me. And this has been a great project, I think, for all of us, and we all feel very close to this piece. Uh, and I think a lot of that has something to do with the, sort of the way you approached writing it. It was almost like it was a gift.
Thank you. I think you two are definitely the gift
Oh,
to many composers. I mean, I couldn't think of a better title, actually. Usually I can come up with titles, but for this piece, I just couldn't think of anything else other than your names, because the piece, usually, as you can hear in other pieces in the album and in the previous album, it has a rather specific story, has a rather autobiographical or culturally specific reference.
mhm.
And this one, I felt like I could free myself from all of that I have done and to explore music in a more abstract way. But it's not that abstract because I have the two of you in my mind, and the
Yeah.
sound you play to each other. But more than that is how intelligently you are and how musically intelligent the two of you are. So I could think about two very wise older musicians in ancient Chinese history playing gujin and
Yeah.
not having to communicate. Oh, I'm going to play this gesture. I'm going to pluck that chord. You need to resolve this, or you need to,
Uh,
imitate this. So I was thinking about more of a kindred spirit, soulmates, and but they've never met. They just discover each other through the piece. So if you think about, if you listen to it, you can hear you always share more or less a harmonic cloud together.
mhm.
But each time when you pluck, especially the open strings, modified open strings, um, Ryan would have different things coming out of it. He's listening, but he's not imposing or pulling you out of the place. It's more of two people sitting in one place, but rediscovering over and over what's in the air, what's in the room.
Yeah.
So really, I was also technically speaking thinking about what it means to write variations, what it means to write repetitions, right?
Yeah.
Do we need exact repetition to repeat?
Mm.
You know,
Right. Right.
what means it's moving forward? How much? Who is initiating this relationship?
Mhm.
Among between the two of you.
Right.
That's what I was really thinking. And also, I visited, you remember, I visited New York before I wrote the piece.
I did.
Really hear you and different pedals, and,
Yeah.
and to later we also discussed like, do we want this to be two people face to face, or we want the guitar to be a larger space,
Mhm.
so embracive, so that I imagine the guitar would be an ocean, and then the saxophone plays beautiful, a lot of multiphonics, um, like almost ethereal, so like a clouds or fog, just lifted above the ocean, but the two are together.
Mm.
So it's really two very understanding souls,
Yeah.
sharing the discovery.
Yeah. No, I do remember that day that you came over to my apartment and we experimented with different pedals and timbres. I remember that really
Yeah.
well. And I think, at least for me, and I suspect a lot of people who have responded so well to this piece, and that has been the reception. I think everybody really always loves this piece. I think it's a lot of it's due to how well you found the sort of complementary sound world between this very watery electric guitar texture with the microtonal tuning and sort of saturated reverb, and Ryan's very sort of delicate key clicks and this sort of a multiphonic vocabulary, and everything just sort of fits together without, but the roles are pretty distinct, and it's just a very evocative uh, combination, I think, and totally unique. I don't know of any piece that's remotely like it. Even if you had
That's
called the
very
piece,
kind. I think, yeah.
you called the piece something different than Ryan and Dan, I'm quite convinced people like it just as much. But it seems to help. Like, I think people find that it's
It definitely helps, yeah.
because
And I totally think it makes sense because also each time when you perform the piece in a different hall, the two of you will have to find the sound.
yeah, 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 and that's been a
Yeah.
hallmark of it, is trying to figure out, in some spaces it gets too washy, in other spaces it
Right.
feels like it's too dry, I need to sort of boost the
Mm-hmm.
reverb. And so there
Right.
isn't really a fixed
Yeah.
sort of a fixed setting, but there is a sort of fixed sense of how the guitar can be immersive and how the saxophone can give that watery texture some more like tactile sense to it, somehow, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And also I think the two of you are super musical, so in a sense you already have to breathe together before you play it.
Right.
And that removed a lot of those counting,
Yeah.
artificial
Right. Right. Right.
counting, which could be in the way. if I think about a very complicated, um, rhythmically intricate duet, I
Mm.
would watch um, the choreography of the performance
Oh,
with
sure.
some kind of nervousness. I don't want that in this piece.
Right. This feels
So you
more
totally,
like a
yeah.
sort of ritual, almost like a sort of incantation. We're like participating in this ritual incantation together. And of course, everything is fully scored out and metered also, but you've you've notated it in such a way that the breathing is built into it, I think. And then as the piece evolves, I always, for me, that sort of final section, everything gets more compressed, and it gives it a sort of natural intensification, which is also very cool. As you hear all the ideas start to become a little bit more, there's less space in between them.
Oh,
Cool. So, well,
thank you.
let's listen to the first minute of Ryan and Dan. Beautiful. So that was the first minute of Ryan and Dan. And well, I just want to say thank you again, Lou, for taking the time to talk about this. And it's really nice, even after a couple months, to revisit and get a chance to think about this beautiful album one more time. This is FCR 277, Wang Lu's An Atlas of Time. And please do go check out the whole album. It's available on all the streaming platforms and for download and physical format in all the places that you would expect to find music these days. And thanks so much, and congrats.
Thank you.
Looking forward
Thank
to
you,
the
Dan.
next one.
Thank you.
Okay, take care, everybody. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.